Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. My guest today is John Williamson, MP of New Brunswick Southwest. Thank you so much for being here today, John.
It's nice to be back again. Summer's finally here, it feels like.
It's finally here, and I really want to start off today by talking about one of the big issues in Southwest New Brunswick, which is the closure of Scotiabank on Grand Manan, which is supposed to be taking place August 24th. It's the island's only bank, as I think everyone by now knows. There was a protest last week, and the Islanders are really hoping they can do everything they can to fight at least till August 24th to see if they can keep it open. What are you hearing about from Islanders, and is there any hope, do you think, for this to stay open?
So this bank closure on Grand Manan is terrible news. It's really going to have a negative impact on their local economy. As anyone who spends any time on the islands know, these are largely cash economies where access to cash is important. And the idea that life is going to continue as it has by moving the branch off the island and relocating customers to St. George is just not realistic. And so I am terribly disappointed with Scotiabank for making this decision. As I think a lot of people know, I've raised this in Parliament. I've written the finance minister. I've written the agency that oversees banking regulations in the country, and I'm aware of the good work that's come out of the council on Grand Manan and the protest they had next week. And we have to keep the pressure on. It's clear this is a decision that was made in a faraway place at the headquarters in Toronto, and it just doesn't stand. It doesn't stand, given that the banks in this country are meant to serve communities, and this is not just closing one branch and sending everyone up the road to another community. I think anyone that looks at a map can see the difficulties Islanders are going to have accessing a branch anywhere. It's not just, this is not a slight against St. George, but the idea of taking a ferry for an hour and a half to do basic banking just doesn't make any sense. And
there are 2,400 people. We're less right here in St. Andrews and have our own bank. And we sat down on the island last week with Mayor Bonnie Morse, and she said she was pretty sure that bank wasn't losing money, that the issue is more the inconvenience of running a bank that is on an island that requires taking those armored vehicles a couple times a week.
Right. I think that's true. I think Grand Manan is a successful fishing community. Plus, in the summer, it has a very vibrant tourist industry as well. I think Bonnie is absolutely correct that it's not a question of dollars and cents. It's not a question of subsidizing their bank. I think it's a question of just bank officials have decided they want to streamline operations, and this is they think, an efficient way to do it. But I think it turns the bank's responsibility to communities, in this case on Grand Manan, on its head. I don't think anyone that knows the area, I don't think could stand up and justify it. And of course, Scotia officials are trying to do that. And unfortunately, this commitment to communities in Canada is not written in law. And so the bank can go through a process to unwind with notification, consultation, but the problem is they don't have to listen. They can, and I don't think consultation, if you're not prepared to listen, is much good, because it just basically means the bank goes through a checklist, and at the end of the day, they're in a legal position where they can then walk away from the community. And I think that is a mistake, particularly because a decade ago or so, when the federal government was thinking of opening up the Competition Act to allow more competition and foreign banks to come in and compete against Canadian banks, the banks told Parliament and the Government of Canada that was a bad idea, because the banks in this country play a special role in serving communities. And their point was they serve community and foreigners wouldn't. But in fact, what we're seeing today on Grand Manan demonstrates that Scotiabank is not doing that. It's not fulfilling its commitment to serve this community. And what I find ironic is that Scotiabank is a strong Canadian bank and has a successful business servicing customers throughout the Caribbean. Islands all over, which they happily serve. But an island in their own country, they're prepared to turn their bank on. And I think it is more than distressing. It is infuriating. This has happened because I just think the people that are making this decision aren't aware of how of the impact of their decision on a great place like Grand Manan.
Mm-hmm. It was emotional too. We live streamed a public meeting they had the night before the protest on the island, and you need a Scotiabank. The name Scotia's in it.
Yeah.
You think of a maritime institution.
Exactly.
When I lived away from home, I always had a Scotiabank card because I knew when I came home that was the bank that I would use. I wouldn't have any service fees. I'm wondering, is there any obligation, and you and I have talked about this before because I know you are concerned about the bank closure, with banks being protected-ish in Canada. Can you explain what that means and if they do have any obligation, or if it's just sort of something they do out of kindness?
Well, legally, there is no obligation for them to serve a community like Grand Manan. And in a way, this protection is allowing to have the best of both worlds. They don't have to worry about a large American bank coming in to Canada to service customers in the large cities. But it also means that on the other side, there's no obligation for banks, in this case Scotiabank, to fulfill what I think is a compact between Canadian banking clients and our large financial institutions in this country. So they're protected without a corresponding requirement for them to service communities across this country. Like in the United States, there are locally, banks are compelled to invest and hold savings in communities across the country. They can't pick and choose. It's something called the Community Reinvestment Act. We don't have something similar in this country. We allow banks to determine how and where they're going to operate. And I'm of the opinion that if banks aren't going to do the right thing by servicing communities, then Parliament should step in and ensure that remote communities are serviced, because this is leaving a place like Grand Manan high and dry, and it will have, I think, potentially a long-term impact on the community's economy.
Mm-hmm. I do want to speak to that point. We heard from people. We were on the island for a couple of days last week. For instance, someone who owns a car wash that's mainly coin operated.
Yep.
What a pain that will be. A young person, and I think one thing that is important to stress is that it seems to be played out. I don't know if this is the bank's part or the media or the roles combined, that this is an issue, that seniors are not necessarily equipped to do online banking, and that Scotiabank will help with it transition. But we're losing that focus by saying, oh, it's just getting used to online banking and that will solve it if they help transition. Because there was a young person we spoke with who just bought a house, and he said, I don't know if I would have bought a house on Grand Manan if I knew a $200,000 house that will depreciate. He sees the future very plainly in front of him of what losing a bank will mean, given that they've lost a funeral home and a dentist this year. For him, losing the bank was a nail in the coffin on his decision to start his life there. And I'm wondering what you're hearing from businesses.
Well, so I am hearing that. Now look, I think Grand Manan will remain a great place to live. It has an incredible community spirit, and you're seeing that with the demonstrations and the work that council is doing. And I think home values are going to maintain and continue to improve as they have. So life will be impacted, but I don't think people should be worried about the hard impact. Having said that, when you mention the person that runs the coin car wash, there's a real impact. Mm-hmm. When you mention seniors who want to go in and be able to withdraw money, do foreign exchanges, and do their banking that way, there'll be an impact. I think of my dad. My dad was happy to take money out of a bank machine, but would not want to put a check into an ATM. He wanted to go see a person. And that's a relationship he had with the bank. Now, he did learn how to pay bills online, and that was fine, but it was a choice. It wasn't one that the bank compelled. But again, in this case, it's more than just those inconveniences, because the alternative is you can't just drive 30 minutes up the road to do banking. It is an expense to take the ferry, even for an islander. It is the time. And again, as I've said many times, St. George is not in the natural orbit of Grand Mananders. When they tend to get off the island, they go right to St. John, not left to St. George. And this is not a slight against St. George. It's just how islanders are oriented when they come off the island. So it will have an impact on people and businesses, and that's why this decision is so bad, because it doesn't offer an alternative. And that's why it is so infuriating, why I think this decision needs to be reconsidered and reversed at the highest levels at Scotiabank.
Yes, there were islanders who said taking a day off work to go do banking when you need to was an issue. Having large sums in their own safes scared them too, and knowing that if they wanted to bring that to a bank would have to travel on it. And another senior we spoke with who said he does all his banking online, but he was recently a victim of fraud, and he said, I went to the bank.
Oh dear.
Within 10 minutes and had it resolved, but I had to get on a ferry. I'm wondering if you've heard anything of another point that Mayor Morse made, which is that the ferry, because of the dentist closure recently, funeral home, is already having more residents who need to use it more frequently. So with the bank closure, she thought potentially this could cost the province more money in terms of funding more trips.
Yeah, I mean I think that's true, because banking is essential, particularly on an economy that is largely cash based as well, and that is not something that's going to change quickly or easily. And the idea that we suddenly start using debit card just because of the nature of the economy, whether it's tourism and fishing. So there could well be an increased load on the ferry, because I think people are going to have to leave the island to do at least their essential banking, and that's another consideration. So for Scotiabank, it looks great. They don't have to run the armored truck. They don't have to count out those quarters. But if you're not in business to do that, why are you considered so important that you're protected from competition?
I think an island that we all look to in this riding is Campobello, when we look to loss and what it can do to a community. Not that Campobello isn't thriving in its own ways, but its population has decreased without things like even a gas station on the island. I know you've been working hard trying to figure out a way to get a year-round ferry there, which could make significant difference for islanders' lives. Can you give us an update on where that's at?
Well, sure. So a few weeks ago in Parliament, I rose and made I think an important statement about where things are at. And for years, a decade, we have been told by federal officials that Transport Canada does not fund ferries within a province. And so everyone's kind of accepted this. The federal government helps fund ferry service between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, PEI, and other points. But I decided to actually have a look to see what Ottawa does and does not fund, and discovered by looking at the public accounts, which is a summary of government spending in detail, that the federal government actually, as what they call a legacy program, has been funding ferry service within New Brunswick to help BC ferries serve remote communities. And that's $30 million a year they provide BC ferries to help these remote communities. Now, for the last 2 years during the pandemic, the federal government has correctly labeled Campobello a remote community by their own definition. So I think that this federal ferry support program opens a huge avenue for the provincial government to go to Ottawa and say, we would like to access this program to serve our remote communities. And right now, the province and the federal government are in the middle of negotiating a number of big infrastructure agreements that I think this shows that there is a federal program. It also meets one of Blaine Higgs' requirements, which is not just assistance from Ottawa to fund the infrastructure, the landing and the ferry vessel itself, but a partnership year over year. And this is, I think, a real discovery that, if it is played well by the province of New Brunswick, could see federal support for a year-round ferry year over year, so it is properly managed and operating, and it's a partnership between the federal government and the province of New Brunswick.
That's very exciting news.
It is because it can't be denied. The federal minister of transportation can no longer tell me that the province or the federal government doesn't fund ferry service within a province. They do clearly in British Columbia. Now, department officials are trying to say, well, this is a legacy program. This is long-standing, as if it's a lockbox, but it's not. The principle behind federal programs is if a program applies to one province, it's open to other provinces provided they meet the criteria. And funding remote communities in British Columbia, okay, we can meet that as well. By your own definition, Ottawa labeled Campobello a remote community, ergo, we should be able to access a very similar program. So this is something that I think there is broad support for in much of New Brunswick. It extends certainly well beyond Campobello now. I think there's a sense it's one of fairness. Mm-hmm. It's one of giving Campobello residents the same access to their country as other Canadians have from coast to coast. And it's one that I've now discovered with a good research team that we don't need to go alone on it. This is not just an issue that provincial taxpayers have to support, but in fact, the federal government's helping British Columbia. They should extend the same help to New Brunswick so we can access Campobello year-round on a ferry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. And I know that the pandemic, obviously, I don't know if you'd call it a silver lining, but definitely did put the spotlight on Campobello, not just for New Brunswick, but all of Canada, that somehow it was okay for us to let them go through Maine to come to New Brunswick. And I think there's that obviously friendly relationship between New Brunswick and Maine, but still it's an international border that's still causing problems.
Well, that's it. It's and the border, despite our talk of good relations with the Americans, the border has been thickening the last couple of years under both presidents, whether it's Democrat or Republican. The border is getting more difficult to cross freely, and in many cases easily, and that includes businesses as well. And I think you're right. I don't think there's a member of Parliament who's not familiar with Campobello. Its unique circumstances, and it's not just one border; it's two. First, leaving first, it's to go through American customs, and then coming into Canada to access Canadian customs. And while both are, they're all familiar with Campobello families, there are still inconveniences, there are time delays, and at times irritation. And so, the route, because of the Roosevelt Campobello National Park, that bridge is going to remain. It will be maintained. It is too valuable a link for tourism, particularly in the summer. But Campobello families should be able to access mainland New Brunswick the same way Canadians can across this country access other parts of their country without having to travel through a foreign country. So I'm encouraged by this, but it's going to take work. We need to be clear on that. The group that has been lobbying for the ferry is going to need to get its arms up. The council, local lawmakers, and of course the province of New Brunswick is in the strongest position to really carry this ball. Should I ever move from the opposition to the government bench, I'll be in a better position. But right now, I'd like to think that we've discovered a program, and as New Brunswickers, we should be working together to get Ottawa to open up its purse string and treat us fairly the way they are British Columbia.
Especially with, I think, the idea that, I know I don't have a crystal ball, but COVID-19, while we seem to be at a turning point, isn't over. And there's obviously been issues for Campobello. I know I honestly prefer driving when I have to go there for work. It's just faster. If I am going for vacation, I'll take a ferry. But because of, even if you just have a doctor's appointment, when they ask you at the hospital, have you been to Campobello? I've avoided driving through at this point so far.
And that has also possibly forced Campobello residents to either miss a doctor's appointment or a visit to a hospital, or to not be truthful about it. And that's not right. If people need health services, they shouldn't be excluded because of a system their own government's put in place. So it's time to take down the barriers. It's time to stop treating Campobello as a second-class island and give it the link so they can, because look, we link up Whitehead to Grand Manan to the mainland, Deer Island to the mainland, and there's other points, other parts of the Maritimes we can point to. the bridge is helpful, but that is not sufficient for these Canadians to access their own country.
And it is a tourism gem, so I hope more people will
Yeah.
check it out as well.
And look, I think more New Brunswickers have realized that it is a great island to visit. Between the whale watching, the golfing, the international park, the Roosevelt Park I mentioned. It's a great place to visit, and a ferry will complement that as well, and just I think make it a more vibrant island.
And for a lot of people, I would say the ferry is a great option because gas prices right now to take that long drive through the U.S., depending on where you're coming from, can be another burden on a traveler. Is there anything going on in Ottawa to help deal with gas prices right now, especially when we're talking rural New Brunswick, where sometimes going to a doctor's appointment is an hour drive?
No, and not only that, the Liberal government doesn't look favorably on provinces that have cut their own provincial gas tax. So, for example, some of the provinces have cut their gas tax to lower pump prices by 10 cents, 12 cents, and the federal government is not even supportive of that. The Liberals have no interest in freezing or suspending the carbon tax or the HST, which is on gas prices as well. And in fact, under the Liberals and the NDP, the carbon tax is going to keep going up every single year. And starting next year, it begins to go up even more than it has the last couple years. So I think the federal government has completely misplayed energy prices, and now we see inflation is taking off. And of course, when energy prices go up, it means everything goes up. Transportation, the cost of agriculture, the cost of heating our homes, you name it, everything is impacted, and that's why we're now facing an inflation rate we haven't seen in some people say 30, but they peg that to the HST with the GST when that came in. But if you look at the real numbers and you discount that one-off tax increase, it's actually 40 years. We're at a 40-year high for inflation. We're back into a world we haven't experienced in a long time, and I think, look, the governor of the Bank of Canada said that when inflation is at 5% above its target of 2%, that costs an individual Canadian $2,000 extra a year. We are now 5 points above where the bank's target is, and that is why families are suffering and hurting. They feel the pinch because it's gas, it's home heating, it's food, it's the price are just going up, and it's having an impact on families, particularly people who are on a fixed income, seniors, or people who are earning an hourly wage and their wages aren't keeping up with inflation. This is, I think we're in, I've said this before, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I do think we are in for some tough times ahead, and I think it's because the government is just not in tune with the difficulties families are facing across the country.
You mentioned the Liberal NDP supply and confidence agreement, which means we probably won't have a federal election for about 3 years from now. That said, the Conservatives are in the middle of a leadership race. Can you tell us the latest on that and when we should expect to know more and when people can vote who are members?
Sure. So we're in the middle of that. The next Conservative leader and who will be the leader of the official opposition will be announced on September the 10th. We're now in the process of candidates are out crisscrossing the country, meeting members, communicating with them through email, and to vote in the leadership race, people need to be a member of the Conservative Party, the federal Conservative Party, by June the 4th. That is the cutoff. And then over the summer, people will begin to receive ballots in the mail, which they will then fill out and return, and those ballots will be counted in early September for that September the 10th announcement. So it's a big process. The number of members, we're told, has shot up by hundreds of thousands. There's a lot of interest in the race. We have 6 good candidates who are crisscrossing the country making their case. Many of them have been to New Brunswick and will come back to New Brunswick, so I think it's going to be a summer of at least conservative politicking across not only New Brunswick but Canada.
I think the last number I read was 400,000 new members, so people are definitely excited.
That's right. Yeah, look. It shows I think, vibrancy. It shows interest. It might also show a bit of fatigue in the federal Liberal government as well. So for the Conservatives, it's an opportunity for renewal. It's an opportunity to talk different ideas and solutions. So these are, I think politics is something that, while it can turn some people off, I think it's also an opportunity for people to get involved in the process and have a say in who the next, in this case, Conservative leader is, leader of the official opposition, and the person that will square off with the Liberal leader, whoever that is in 2 or 3 years. It could be Justin Trudeau, or it could be someone else. We just don't know. But until then, we have to move forward as a party. It's I think our obligation to Canadians to put forward our best foot in ideas that we think will make the lives of Canadians better and strengthen the country.
Well, I can't wait to sit down with you again to hear more when you have an update next time you're back. I know you'll be here for the Jubilee celebrations coming up in southwest New Brunswick. But thank you for being here today, too.
My pleasure, Vicki. All the best.
My guest today has been MP John Williamson of New Brunswick Southwest. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.